of expensive toys and real estate.
That really takes my mind off of work.
He spent $400 million to bring the 2010 America's Cup, the oldest active trophy in sports, back to America for the first time in 15 years. But his success comes from something far less flashy. Some of the world's most essential software. Tools you use every day, but probably don't realize that it's his company making them work.
Almost everybody in the world uses Oracle. They just don't know it. If you do any kind of government transaction with almost any government in the world, any business transaction with almost any internet business in the world or any traditional business, if you have a credit card, if you have a cell phone, if you have any of the modern things in life, if you live today, I think you probably use Oracle.
Larry Ellison arguably created the most important computer software you never heard of. He was the man behind the curtain for a tremendous change in the way we all live.
Ellison remained behind that curtain when we tried to reach him to participate in this program. Born in the Bronx in 1944, Ellison grew up in Chicago. When he was 12, his father bluntly gave him some surprising news.
My dad just said right before dinner, "Oh, by the way, you were adopted and we're having meatloaf tonight." It was so shocking. I just put it away and thought about it for years without really, confronting all and realizing all of the implications.
He dropped out of college twice. Ellison was a mediocre student and disliked formal education. Mike Wilson is an editor for the St. Petersburg Times and interviewed Ellison extensively for his biography.
Larry was not interested in following the rules at school, in the family, or anywhere else. Larry needed to get out from underneath the shadow of Louis Ellison and prove to his father that he could make something of himself.
His flair for the fast lane was obvious early.
Larry went out and bought himself a turquoise blue Thunderbird. He was a stylish guy. He wanted to impress people. He got in that car and he drove it to California. And Larry Ellison was a young man with a great deal of potential. His trip to California was critical to who he would become.
Ellison settled in Berkeley and set out to make a living writing code. In 1973, he worked at the computer electronics maker Amdahl. There, he met Stuart Fagan. They've remained friends for over 35 years.
I went into my cubicle on the first day I worked there, and across the hall were a couple of guys who never seemed to do any work. They just talked all the time. And one of them did nothing but talk about himself, how smart he was, how stupid everyone else was, and how he really ought to be running everything. And that was Larry Ellison.
Ellison was a talented but impatient programmer, desperate to find something of his own to control.
To say he had the attention span of a tumbleweed is to overestimate it. I would say more the attention span of a lightning bolt.
But his attention focused when he landed a job at a company called Ampex. Ampex was struggling with a project funded by, of all places, the information-driven CIA. The project was codenamed Oracle. The CIA needed a system to store and retrieve vast amounts of foreign intelligence, concerned with its various sensitive operations and missions. For Ellison, it was the job of a lifetime, and would plant the seeds for his future. In the 1970s, information storage meant putting data on reel-to-reel tape, which was just too slow and inconsistent for the CIA, and too slow for Ellison. He left Ampex and later started his own company with his friend and programming genius, Bob Miner.
Bob and Larry were a perfect odd couple for Silicon Valley. Bob had all of the engineering smarts, the technical ability. Larry, on the other hand, had the sales ability, the visionary ability, the ability to go to a customer and explain, here's how your business can change.
With this original handwritten sign and $1,200, they started Software Development Laboratories, or SDL. Ellison recruited friends Ed Oates and Stuart Fagan to help program.
He did want me to join him, and he's going to start some kind of company. And I thought that was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard, because Larry wasn't famous for finishing things. I used to say he's a total flake and he'll never amount to anything, and I was half right.
Ellison's new company needed a product. And after reading an obscure IBM research paper, he thought he had it. A method of sorting information that was vastly superior to anything that had come before. It was called a relational database. According to Gary Bloom, who worked with Ellison for 14 years, it was a complex name, but a simple idea.
Relational database, what is it? It's a collection of data and information that's very simply put into a format that makes it very easy to search and find that information. It's nothing more complicated than that.
IBM didn't see the potential of what they had. Ellison did.
I said, oh my God, we can beat IBM to market because IBM doesn't believe in their own idea.
Ellison believed and asked programmer Bruce Scott to start writing code.
For me, it's just cool technology and kind of fun. But for Larry, he saw a company out of it. He saw a market out of it.
We weren't sure Larry was right, but we needed the jobs, and it was a struggle all the time. Larry was under a lot of pressure to get some money in somehow.
In 1977, at age 34, Larry Ellison's startup software company was busy creating a smart database they thought would revolutionize how companies retrieve, manage, and analyze data.
3 rooms and a little lobby area. There were 4 of us who were writing programs. Larry was mostly involved in finding customers. And that was a bizarre idea because we had no software.
So all the things that you would read in books of somebody being a leader, he wasn't. But he was tenacious. He would never give up on anything.
Ellison chased and cajoled customers, becoming the company's chief evangelist.
There was nobody better than Larry at making a business person, making a customer believe that he could change that person's business life with his product.
Knowing they still needed a smarter solution for the monumental task of managing worldwide intelligence, Ellison sold his database to the CIA, his first customer. He called the new software Oracle Version 2.
There was no version 1 because everyone thought, no one buys version 1, it's buggy. So we started with version 2. Well, our version 2 was at least as buggy as anyone's version 1. And I described those early versions as the Roach Motel of databases. The data went in, but it didn't come out.
In 1982, Ellison also took the name Oracle for his company. He targeted government agencies and major corporations in his own unique way.
I remember him telling me very distinctly one time, Bruce, we can't be successful unless we lie to customers.
For some reason, Larry told the Bank of America, I think he told us there were 15 of us, when in fact there were 5 of us. Now, I'm not sure why the Bank of America would think differently of you if you're 5 or 15. But Larry had given them a number which was a little larger than reality.
Ellison also was sharpening a sales philosophy rooted in a trip he had taken to Japan in the early 1970s.
I was in Japan and I was talking to a Japanese business executive, and he told me, that the problem with America is that we just have no stomach for competition. In Japan, we believe our competitors are stealing the rice out of the mouths of our children. In Japan, we think anything less than 100% market share is not enough.
His take-no-prisoners approach became known as the Oracle Way.
The Oracle Way in the early to mid-'80s was just to win, almost by any means necessary.
Larry's attitude is if you want to compete against me, then you better be prepared to be crushed, or don't compete against me.
His product, the Oracle Database, took off like a jet fighter in one of his ads. And in 1986, Oracle...
U.S. citizen, you can vote from here, and even here. Using an absentee ballot, Americans who are traveling or living abroad have the right to vote from anywhere. Whether by email, postal mail, or by dropping your ballot off at a U.S. embassy or consulate, make sure you don't miss the next election. Request your ballot today.
Went public. His 39% stake in the company was worth a stunning $93 million. The IPO was a huge hit, but was overshadowed the very next day by Microsoft's public offering, which made Bill Gates' stake worth a whopping $350 million. In 1989, Ellison moved Oracle to this mammoth campus in Redwood Shores, California, which became known as the Emerald City, a reference to the Wizard of Oz, or as one newspaper described it, Larryland, and everyone knew who was the wizard.
When I ordered a Ferrari 348, and I was going to get the first 348 in California, Larry ordered one from somewhere on the East Coast and got it shipped in before I got mine. He didn't want to be the second one. He wanted to be the first one.
His obsession to be first took its toll.
Oracle hit a wall. These aggressive sales practices started to cause serious problems.
Oracle's aggressive sales practices in the 80s turned the company into an accountant's nightmare.
The sales force was so aggressive, so willing to close a deal, and there were so few business controls over the makeup of those deals. Then we started having the problem of we certainly signed some bad contracts.
They were also selling products that hadn't yet been created.
Oracle was selling a lot of futures, so you were taking a lot of money in, a lot of revenue in for future deliverables. Well, then the question comes, when you finally have those deliverables, now who do you sell them to? You already sold it to everybody. You sold it to them 3 years before you had it.
It didn't help the company's prospects that their latest product was a dud. Oracle version 6 was riddled with bugs. Customers were frustrated and sales plummeted.
It's sometimes characterized as the near-death experience of Oracle in the early 90s, and it was. We weren't cutting fat. We were cutting into muscle, and you might even say in a couple of cases, we're cutting a couple limbs off.
With Oracle's stock price in free fall, so was Ellison's personal fortune. By November 1st, 1990, he had lost $790 million. His company was nearly $1 billion operation, and it was failing.
Larry was trying to achieve this greatness. He was building towards that all the time, and now he was, in a sense, a laughingstock. It was devastating for him.
We're all a bunch of kids that grew up with the business. And we weren't kids anymore, and the business wasn't a little business anymore, it was big business, and we had to replace virtually all of senior management. And it was a very painful process.
He convinced well-known management and sales consultant Ray Lane to join the company.
And what he brought was what I'd characterize as operational discipline and a maturity around this is how a big business runs. It was chaotic, it was painful. Nobody wanted to go through that again. And so the culture was kind of reset.
But the company's real savior came in the form of a new product. Zach Nelson was Oracle's youngest marketing executive.
Oracle 7 was a spectacular product. The future was incredibly bright. And I think everybody within Oracle at that time certainly knew it and could sense it.
It wasn't just incrementally better, it was orders of magnitude better.
Ellison's company had dodged its near-death experience. In 1994, Oracle revenues passed the $2 billion mark, and his stock as a result was worth nearly $3 billion. For Ellison, that wasn't nearly enough. To become software's sole heavyweight, Ellison knew he had to pick a fight with the reigning champion, Bill Gates.
He seemed to be personally disappointed he wasn't wealthier than Bill Gates. It's the scorecard. And if you weren't number one, if you weren't richest, you weren't on the top, you weren't the best. It was the scorecard and he was losing.
I think that Larry thought he was in tremendous competition with Bill Gates, and maybe Gates didn't think so much. Larry wanted to be recognized as the greatest innovator, salesman, evangelist in the world of software. And he had a steep battle going up against the guy who had put his software in every single personal computer practically in the world.
Ellison was fixated on Gates. He would later admit publicly to hiring private detectives to dig up dirt on him. Gates' new product, Windows 95, had the entire tech world buzzing, including Ellison himself in this appearance on The Charlie Rose Show.
This Windows 95 is an enormously complicated piece of software. And the idea that people are going to install this in their households and manage these things in their household, to me, is hilarious. And it's time for something that's easier to use. Well, this is clearly part of our strategy to dethrone Microsoft. But the way you dethrone Microsoft is not somebody that, to throw darts at Bill Gates and hate and envy Bill Gates. You have to think about products and create products that are better than the products that Microsoft is selling.
Ellison made a move into the consumer device market. He called it the Network Computer, or NC.
He launched the network computer with great fanfare.
The computers we currently make, personal computers, are rather expensive, right? Very, very complex. So we've introduced this new class of computer for normal human beings at very low cost. That's pretty. Very low cost, very lightweight. Now every person can use a computer because they're low cost and very easy to use.
You can surf the net, you can do email on, and he said, and it's going to be $500. It's kind of an internet appliance, so to speak, no different than your toaster.
I can remember having a discussion with him saying, the internet makes it possible to imagine a world without Microsoft's operating system on every desktop. And that was really, the birth of the NC.
Ellison went on a campaign to promote the power of his new baby on the web, while mocking the popular PC.
I hate the PC with a passion. Put the stuff on the net. It's bits. Don't put bits in cardboard in trucks to stores. Me go to the store, pick this stuff out. It's insane. I love the internet.
But falling PC prices meant the NC was destined to fail.
I don't think there was anything wrong with the idea. I actually just think it was premature. 5 years later, it would have won the world. And the only difference is all the PC manufacturers, Dell, HP, everybody else, Gateway, what did they do? They created a $500 PC that surfs the web really well, and it does email really well.
And that shut down Ellison's venture into the consumer market. His NC was too far ahead of its time, but his vision of the internet was still right on target.
Oracle's database became the underpinnings of all of these internet services that we take for granted today. It was Expedia, Amazon, eBay, go down the list of applications. All of those are storing all that information, retrieving that information, delivering that information, doing those transactions through the Oracle database. People thought Larry was crazy. Now, he's a genius.
Kind of solved the biggest IT problem in history.
By 2000, Larry Ellison's company, Oracle, was among the elite tech companies in the world. But internal struggles would soon force out the company's president and chief operating officer, Ray Lane, who had risen to second in command and heir apparent. He described the culture at the company he left.
It wasn't good enough for a salesman to make their quota. They had to make 200% of their quota. It was, the top 10% get rewarded millions, and everybody else, falls by the wayside. They're weak soldiers, shoot them.
A departing Lane said he didn't fit into Oracle's system and that the only person making decisions at Oracle is Larry.
Lots of people that transitioned in and out of Oracle got confused who was in charge. And that's a pretty volatile, that's like a galactic collision, where two stars hit, and it's a pretty violent explosion.
Oracle, the company, was on a roll, but was lagging behind in one key area.
We're still fighting to be relevant in the applications world.
We're the number 2 application provider in the world, and we're number 2 in ERP behind SAP. Boy, this number 2 is getting old. And we're number 2.
Not for long.
We're number 2 in CRM behind Siebel, but we're growing faster than SAP, and we're growing faster than Siebel, and we're determined to become number 1 in applications like we're number 1 in database.
To get to number 1, Ellison needed to do something his company had long avoided: buying new technology through acquisitions.
When he came to that conclusion, he opened his wallet and bet far bigger than anyone else did. And in fact, he did it far faster than anyone else did.
Ellison wanted to bundle new application software with Oracle's successful product line. In 2003, he targeted the company PeopleSoft in a hostile takeover attempt. The Department of Justice sued Oracle on antitrust grounds, charging the takeover would empower the company to illegally raise rates and impair innovation. After a 1.5-year-long battle, the courts sided with Oracle. Ellison finally acquired PeopleSoft for $10.3 billion.
It's very rare that someone gets sued by the government and they actually win. It's just another testament to this guy's tenacity. Most guys would have maybe walked away from that.
Instead, Ellison stepped it up. Over the next 5 years, he would spend close to $34 billion acquiring 52 companies. Heather Bellini is Senior Managing Director of the Technology Research Team at International Strategy and Investment Group. She has covered Oracle since 2003.
He started looking out and seeing how the landscape was changing and how the carnage that was done to some of his competitors was going to give him an opportunity to go make some acquisitions and buy some technology where he was behind. And he really was the one that started the whole M&A trend within the technology industry.
Ellison's appetite for acquisitions accelerated in 2009 with his $7.4 billion trophy purchase of the prominent hardware company Sun Microsystems. But in 2010, his eyes were on another trophy, a decade-long $400 million obsession: BMW Oracle Racing was launched in 2000 for Ellison's run at the America's Cup. It may be the oldest active prize in international sport, but what Ellison created was entirely new. The boat is a trimaran. It often appears to be nearly flying, with only one of its 3 hulls actually in contact with the water. The oceans have never seen anything like it.
There is absolutely no doubt that he hates to lose. There is no doubt of that at all.
Grant Dalton has competed against Ellison on the America's Cup circuit.
My recollection in racing against him, and we will race against him in the future, is this is a man that's very determined to win.
On Valentine's Day 2010, Ellison brought the America's Cup back to the United States for the first time in 15 years. He celebrated with his now ex-wife, romance novelist Melanie Kraft. It was his 4th marriage. The old samurai warrior re-emerged when his friend Mark Hurd resigned as CEO at Hewlett-Packard amid allegations of sexual harassment and expense account irregularities. Ellison was outraged. He attacked the HP board of directors.
He said, quote, "The HP board just made the worst personnel decision since the idiots on the Apple board fired Steve Jobs many years ago."
Exactly 1 month later, Ellison stunned the business world when he turned around and hired the ousted executive. The Silicon Valley soap opera continued when HP named Leo Apotheker as its chief executive. His former company, SAP, is Oracle's biggest rival in business software. SAP and Oracle had been locked in a nasty 3-year copyright infringement case that ended in November 2010.
SAP, the German software firm, was ordered to pay Oracle $1.3 billion.
It was the biggest settlement ever for software piracy. Larry Ellison's brawl had drawn new blood on the information technology battlefield. And as always, he is more determined than ever to win.
Larry Ellison is pretty similar to the New York Yankees. They're the team you love to hate. And as a competitor to Larry Ellison, I'm sure that he's the person that people love to hate, just given how successful he's been.
While most visionaries you think are sort of just talking off their hat and saying, oh, this is how the world can be, you know, Larry sees how the world can be, and then he actually tries to make it that.
He started with a $1,200 stake in a little company, and by sheer force of will and persuasion, he built it into one of the giant software companies of the world.
what is artificial intelligence? With the rapid advances in AI and machine learning, it's incredibly important that young people understand how this technology is affecting their lives now and the role that AI applications will play in their future. The Raspberry Pi Foundation and DeepMind have partnered to create everything you need to learn about this exciting, cutting-edge technology. Enable your learners to understand what AI is and investigate a variety of applications through practical activities, to think critically about the societal impact of this technology on their lives and future careers, and explore ethical considerations through classroom discussions of real-world context. These lessons have everything you need to inspire young people through the power of AI. Lesson plans, presentation slides, educational videos, and worksheets, all for free. Sign up now at rpf.io/experienceai.
Watch late drama. No one marking Palmer again.
Stream all Premier League games wherever you are on Showmax Premier League. Available now on Showmax.
You're the only person on earth that followed Steve Jobs and Elon Musk for years and years. So, what did you learn?
This is going to be a fun ride.
Walter Isaacson,
one of the greatest biography writers ever,
whose work allows all of us to learn from some of the greatest minds in history.
And all the people I've written about who are disruptors, they tend to have had demons driving them. But for Elon Musk, it was particularly brutal. A scrawny kid on the autism spectrum, no friends, beaten up quite often. But the scars from that were minor compared to what happened when he went home. It took traveling around with Elon for 2 years, morning, noon, and night, before I could get him to open up about his father. And then it started coming out. Everything from his hard wiring to a psychologically abusive father helped make somebody who's addicted to drama. He was at Twitter headquarters. He decides they should get rid of one of the server farms. And the engineers say, we can't do it. He fires them. And then Christmas Eve, Elon forces his way into the server facility with a set of wire cutters and cuts the cable to the server. It drove the teams crazy, but it drove them to do things they didn't think they could do. Because Musk spends 80% of his hardcore mental energy on...
But is he happy? How did Steve Jobs change you?
When he was dying, I was in his backyard with him, and he says, I regret.
Imagine that you could follow Steve Jobs and Elon Musk for years and years and years and years. Imagine what you would learn. Imagine what you would see. Imagine the value that you would take from that experience of following two of the greatest world-shifting entrepreneurs that have ever lived. Well, the man that sits in front of me today was given that privilege. He got to follow Steve Jobs until the day that he died. And he got to follow Elon Musk for years and years and years in order to write down what he saw and share that information with you. If you've ever wondered what it takes to be a genius, what it takes to change the world, what the cost is, the sacrifice, how to make decisions, how to think, and how and what motivates these world-changing entrepreneurs, in the next hour and a half, you find out. And before this episode starts, I want to make a deal with you. About 58% of you that watch this podcast frequently haven't yet hit the subscribe button. If you enjoy what we do here, here's the deal that I want to make with you. If you hit that subscribe button, I promise you that we will keep making this show better in every single way. And we have huge plans to turn this into more of a documentary style conversation where we work incredibly hard to bring in footage of the things we're talking about to give you greater context and greater meaning. So if you hit the subscribe button, I promise you that we will deliver an even greater version of this show. I hope you choose to come along on this journey. Enjoy this episode. Walter, you have a tremendous amount of insight from following and studying some of the world's greatest minds, but also from a tremendously successful career of your own as a CEO and as a business person. For anybody that doesn't know, who are the individuals that you've been able to follow and study and had unique exclusive access to?
It was mainly Steve Jobs who brought us into the digital revolution with everything from friendly computers to 1,000 songs in our pocket. And I spent about 2 years at his side doing a biography of him. And then Jennifer Doudna, who I think brought us into the life sciences revolution because she and her colleagues helped invent CRISPR, this tool that can edit our own DNA, which is like, whoa, that's transformative. And so I spent a lot of time at her Berkeley lab and learning how to edit human genes. And then after that, the next logical choice seemed to be Elon Musk, bringing us into the era of space travel, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence. And surprisingly, when I talked to him, he had read a couple of my books. I said, I just want to do this not based on 5 or 10 interviews, but based on staying by your side for 2 years, watching you morning, noon, and night whenever I want. And he went, okay. And then I said, but by the way, I'm not going to show you the book in advance. You get no control over it. And he went, okay. And I thought, all right, this is going to be a fun ride.
Were you surprised?
I was a little bit surprised, but if you know Musk, he has sort of a little superhero complex, and he thinks of himself playing big roles on the world stage, and he loves to be transparent. And I kind of suspected he would want to have this. There was a mutual friend who helped broker the deal, and the friend said, he wants a biography. I think he sees himself in the same trajectory as a Steve Jobs or a Jennifer Doudna.
And why did you want to do it?
I wanted to do somebody who was taking us back into the era of space travel, because I'm old enough to be one of those geeks who remember the countdown of 10, 9, 8, and you hold your breath, and they'd launch from Cape Canaveral. Also, I believe very much sustainable energy is important to the planet, which means not just electric vehicles, but solar roofs and power walls and the things he's doing. I also tend to think that he's a great engineer. He understands physical engineering. He doesn't understand human emotions very well, which is why he was better off with Tesla and SpaceX and not buying Twitter. But I wanted to understand the pioneering work that was being done. He's the only person who can get astronauts from the U.S. into orbit. NASA can no longer do it. Boeing can't do it. So how come? How did he make those rockets work?
And with Steve Jobs, what was the access that you were given to him?
Oh, I stayed in his guest house right in his backyard for off and on for a couple of years. It wasn't quite the access I got to Elon Musk. With Steve Jobs, it might be 1 week every couple of months I'd spend with him. With Musk, it was 3 or 4 weeks per month sometimes. Steve Jobs was interesting, but he was mainly interested in the beautiful design and conceptualizing of products. And so we'd spend a lot of time in Johnny Ive's wonderful design studio at Apple headquarters, where Steve would spend the afternoon hour after hour walking around, even looking at things like the European plug for a charger and how it was going to be different from the American plug, but how curved. He just cared about God being in the details of each design. Musk cares a lot more about executing the design through manufacturing and assembly lines. Musk spends about 80% of his hardcore mental energy designing the machines that make the machines. In other words, the Raptor engines or the battery cells or the Teslas. And so a lot of the time I spent with him was on assembly lines.
When I sit here with CEOs or successful people, I always start with their childhood, because I think it provides an important context as to the people that they are. It's almost like their childhood.
You're like a biographer. It begins in childhood.
Well, I mean, you're the king of biography, so I had no idea that that's where it's meant to start. It just seems like the most obvious place, because it's the foundation of people, and those fingerprints seem to remain on them as adults. When you look at Elon's childhood, do you spot things that are the reason he is the man he is today.
Absolutely. But let me step back and talk about almost all the people I've written about who are disruptors. They tend to have had childhoods in which they were misfits. Starting with Leonardo da Vinci, who I wrote about. He grew up in a small village. He was left-handed, illegitimate. His father doesn't legitimate him. He was gay. He was distracted. And so he has demons driving him as he runs away from the village of Vinci to go to Florence. And you can go all the way through. Albert Einstein, growing up Jewish in Germany. Steve Jobs, having been adopted, and adoptive family didn't take to him, and he moves on to another one. For Elon Musk, it was particularly brutal. He grew up in South Africa as a scrawny kid on the autism spectrum, so he had no social input-output skills. He was no friends, and he was beaten up quite often. But the scars from that were minor compared to what happened when he went home after being beaten up once. He was in the hospital for 4 days, but he gets home and his father makes him stand in front of him for 2 hours while the father tells him he's a loser and that it was his fault, and takes the side of the kid who beat up Elon. And so it's one of the oldest tropes in mythology, which is the aspiring young superhero fighting the dark side of the Force and finding out Darth Vader is his father, having to overcome those demons. I think most of us, I mean, you have a very interesting background yourself, from Botswana to Manchester to here in London. I think most of us have things that drive us, and sometimes there's some demons from childhood. But the question is whether you harness those demons or those demons harness you. And in Elon Musk's case, the answer is both.
Do you find that that's nearly always the case, that those demons create both your, as Tim Grover said to me, Tim Grover was the coach for Michael Jordan, Kobe, and he speaks to everybody having a dark side and a light side, and they have a two-way relationship with each other. They typically come from the same place. So he'd speak to Michael Jordan's greatness coming from the same place that his dark side came from.
And you've just described the entire theme of the Elon Musk book, which is darkness and lightness woven together, each coming from the same place, sometimes driving people crazy, sometimes driving them to do things they didn't think they'd be able to do. And you want to take out the dark strands of Elon Musk, the demon mode, as his girlfriend Grimes calls it, where he just truly gets cold and in a very bad place. But if you take out those strands, maybe you don't have Elon Musk at the end, because the dark and the light all come from the same roots. Shakespeare, as usual, said it best. Even the best are molded out of faults. And indeed, that's what you're talking about, whether it's Michael Jordan or Kobe or Elon Musk.
What does Elon think of his father? Did you speak to him directly about him?
Yes. He doesn't speak to his father anymore, of course, and it's a very brutal relationship. Yeah, but I spoke to his father.
You did?
Yeah, for quite a long time. And still, he's in contact with me. It took a year of traveling around with Elon Musk before I could get him to open up about his father. And that's why a biography done the way Boswell did with Dr. Johnson, and in a much smaller way I tried to do with Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, is important, because you're not just doing a few interviews. You're just with them day in, day out. And after a year, every now and then I'd say, tell me about your childhood, tell me about your dad. And he'd just stare blankly and be not wanting to speak. And then one day, we're actually on this plane flying to California from Texas. And once again, it was very quiet. Finally said, tell me about your dad. It was about the 20th time I'd asked him. He must have been silent for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I didn't say a word. And then it started coming out, the stories of childhood. And so, yeah, he's still rattled by the memory of it. His father has had 2 children by a young woman that he had raised as a stepdaughter. And so that really messed up Elon's mind.
Elon's father raised a stepdaughter and then had 2 kids with
the stepdaughter, yes. And so There's, and he's talked about it. Elon Musk also is an astonishingly good engineer who gave many good things in childhood. He was at times successful, at times less so.
Errol is his father.
Errol is the father. But he also instilled some of these demons. So it's the most complex relationship. You know, Barack Obama begins one of his memoirs by saying, I think every successful man is either trying to live up to the expectations of his father or live down the sins of his father. And Obama says, in my case, it's both. Well, in Elon's case, it's both.
And what did you learn, if anything, from speaking to Elon's father?
I learned that he was like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the Stevenson thing, in novel. In other words, he could be a brilliant doctor, but then he'd snap into these demon-like modes, and Mr. Hyde, and hardly remember when he would snap back out and became Dr. Jekyll, hardly remember what happened. And that multiple personality was very much what Elon Musk himself says. Yes, I go through these things. Well, guess what? You see that in Elon Musk.
Based on what you saw in some of the resilient leaders that you've followed, if your job was to create a really resilient child, what would you do to the child?
You know, that's such an interesting question. And those of us who have children in this day and age, I think we can't help but coddling them too much. I watched the way Elon was raised in South Africa, where his father gave him a motorcycle when he was 11 or 12 years old and going around. He would almost free range be that way, Elon would. He could walk or go wherever he wanted, get beaten up, and his parents weren't hovering. Well, likewise, I watch Elon, who has 10 surviving children, and Elon is deeply committed to those children. He's almost obsessed by them, and yet, especially with little X, I don't know if you've seen the 3-year-old kid who is always in the pictures with Elon, like if you see a picture of Elon at the F1.
Oh, yeah, he's holding him.
He's always holding his... I'd be there at night. They'd be doing a solar roof installation at midnight, and Musk would be in hyperdrive, getting all the equipment and telling people what to do, because Musk loved to be hands-on. And I'd watch little X playing amid the cables and heavy equipment. And my instincts are like, go grab this kid and make sure he's safe. But I think that Musk, I remember when they shot off Starship, this largest rocket ever, for the first test, which went well for about 3 minutes. And afterwards, we're sitting down in South Texas at the launch pad behind it and having drinks in their fire pits. And Elon is there with his mother, May, his girlfriend, Grimes, and little X. And X is playing in a fire pit, just putting things in and my instincts are go grab the kid. And Musk says to me, when I was a kid, they used to say, don't play with matches. So I got a box of matches and I played with them behind a tree. And it was his way of saying, I'm going to let X continue to do that. And Mae Musk said, I think it's one generation of risk seekers training the next. So maybe we should allow our kids to be a little bit more risk-taking as opposed to hovering the way my wife and I do.
And I was reading in your book about how when Elon's parents got a divorce when he was young, that meant that Elon's mother, who was taking care of him, had to then go and get a job, which left Elon at home alone. Right.
That's what I'm saying. He was pretty much home alone. His mother had 3 jobs at times, and she's a great person, but she wasn't somebody who doted and worried every moment of the day. And so she was often not around and divorced from his father. At one point, Elon, as a very young teenager, decides to move back in with his father, which is psychologically, even now, Mae Musk says, why did he do that? And Kimball, his brother, says he associates pain with love. And Elon Musk says to me, adversity shaped me. It made me who I am. So there's a part of Elon Musk that loves drama and rushing into the fire.
He associates pain with love. From your observations, do you believe that regardless of whether it's healthy or not, we tend to seek out the environment of our childhood when we're older? Because familiarity is almost sometimes seems to be more important to us than whether it's healthy.
That's a brilliant observation, which is, because certainly with Elon Musk, he's almost always trying to recreate the drama, the turmoil of his childhood in apartheid South Africa, seeing people killed and having an psychologically abusive father. And I think we're all different. I'm personally somebody who had a pretty nice childhood. My parents were the sweetest, nicest, smartest people I've ever known. And I grew up in New Orleans and still go back there, still live with about 8 blocks from where I was born and see the kids I went to kindergarten with. And I love going back to that magical, we call it the green trees of our childhood. But it's also why I'm not driven. I'm not as a disruptor the way Jobs and Musk are. I'm a little bit more suited to being amused and watching disruptors. So my role is a little bit more as an observer. You've been both. You've been an observer on this podcast or on TV, but you're also a person in the arena by starting companies. I was in the arena quite a while. I ran CNN during the Gulf War, and it was a pretty intense thing to do. But in some ways, I'm not as suited to running into fire and turmoil as Elon Musk is. And when the time came and the Gulf War was over, I decided I'd rather write books and go back to New Orleans.
So do you did touch on this earlier, but it just came back to mind again. Do you think